Hi there, welcome to the archives. So I wanted to get on here today and just quickly go over the 36, what is it, 36 warriors, queens, and intellectuals. I was able to rewatch the Trung sisters because I feel like I rushed it. Um, and then I'm also going to do, today we're going to Asia. We're going to do the Trung sisters in Vietnam. And then we're going to do Wu Zaitun. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Wu Zetian in China. So I'll get right into it because it is a little bit, this is Aria. She's feeling a little bit clingy, my little cutie. Oh, you're going? She's like, you want to call me clingy, eh? Watch me walk away. All right, come on, let's do it. So I want to go back to do the Trunk sisters. So again, this was year in the year 25. Could you imagine? We're in 2025 now. This was year 25 CE. I said I would revisit, go back and see how did the transition from BCE, which is like before Christ or something, to CE work? Does anybody know how that that era worked? Um, Sorry, I'm gonna get distracted. Okay, so this is year 25. We're in the Red River Delta in Vietnam, and at that time it was conquered by the Chinese Han Dynasty. And the Han Dynasty had ruled for over 100 years already. And so the Red River, it moves from China down into Vietnam. And the traditional Vietnamese culture, if you remember, I was saying that it had rich lowlands, there was mangrove swamps, saltwater crocodiles, to the point where some of the villages were on stilts. In Ghana, when I went to Ghana in 2008, we visited a village on stilts. It was called Nzulezu. And so I think that's similar. They built the city on stilts, and it still has, it's still there today apparently. And before that, it was ruled by the Hung Dynasty. The Hung Dynasty, they were Vietnamese, um, and it was like 28 BCE. See, I want to know what's the difference. Anybody out there know the difference between BCE and the transition from BCE to CE? I'm not really clear on that, so I have to go look at that myself because I'm not comprehending how we transitioned from BCE. Like, when was the Ice Age? I think I wanted to go back and look at that to see when the Ice Age was, because I read something recently that was talking about, like, what if there was another Ice Age, right? Um, we're more likely to have the Earth is actually not freezing, it's melting. So we would be doing the reverse, but I'm getting off topic. And the Vietnamese rulers used to have tattoos of crocodiles, and so Vietnam was known as a land of crocodile men, apparently. So at that Trung Trac and Trung Ni, they were sisters, and it said that they were related to the Hung Kings, on their mom's side. So on their maternal side, they were part of the Hung Dynasty, allegedly. And so their mom was the one who ruled them, who raised them. Um, the villagers, they made money off the rice fields, and they were called the Chinese called them the Lac people, LAC, the Lac people. And so Vietnam at the time was rich. It still is. It's rich in natural resources like copper, iron, gold, silver, jade, and even cowrie shells. So remember, whenever you hear natural resources, guess who's going to show up? Columbus and them, right? And so in this case, it was the Chinese. Later, the in Vietnam, the French would come, the Americans would come, right? But right now we're talking about the Chinese. Yeah, the Chinese colonial rule. The French would come, the Americans would come later. But at this time, it was the Chinese who arrived, right? And they were like, wow, Vietnam has natural resources. Look at all of this iron, Look at all of this gold. Look at all of these like just rich in natural resources. So the Lac tribes, they used bronze in the year 25. So that was their Bronze Age, right? And it was called the Dongson culture. Dong, D-O-N-G, Sun, S-O-N culture. Um, so yeah, they didn't do nuclear families, right? All of this like mother, father, daughter, son, white picket fence with a dog. That didn't exist. They didn't have nuclear families. It was they lived in clans, right? Um, the women had sovereignty. The Dongson culture was matriarchal. It was said the child's mother was played an important part. The father sometimes was not necessarily always there because they would be out doing their own thing. Um, and it's important to note that at that time, women chose who they wanted to be with. Women chose who they wanted to marry, and this would happen in the spring. There was a spring festival, and then the young women would choose who they wanted to take. This would change, right? When the Chinese came, this would change. Um, but yeah, so women were important. A lot of the moms, same as today, moms were blamed because they were the ones mostly doing the child rearing. Um, the Chung sisters were raised by their mom. Their mom raised them because their father was killed, from my understanding. And their mom raised them to be in martial arts. They were, they rode war elephants. They were brave. They were bold. And in 1111 BC, the Han Dynasty moved down to Vietnam, and they ruled the Delta for over a century, like I already said. There was a revolution that overthrew the Han Dynasty, and that was established in 206 BCE, and then it fell. It fell briefly, and the Jin Dynasty XYN took over from 9 BCE to 23 BCE, right? So the new dynasty, they were called the Eastern Han, and they ruled for another 200 years until 2020 CE. And so when the new ruler came in, his name was Guan. Okay, so Guan Wudi, it said that he was born around 5 BCE and he died around 57 CE. See the transition from 5 BCE to 57 CE? Like, what was that transition? Why did we go from BCE to CE? Maybe I'll answer that in another one because I don't know that myself, right? In all humble humility, I really don't know that's such a long time ago. So when Guan Wudi came in, he introduced a lot of new changes to Vietnamese culture. He needed money to replace the wars that had happened, and so he raised taxes. Guan Wudi raised the taxes. He chose Jen Yen to serve in Vietnam. So he sent a commander from China down to Vietnam named Jen Yen. And this time it said that Jen Yen brought in the Iron Age, right? The iron increase, which also increased production. And then Jen Yen also brought in Confucianism, right? Remember, Confucianism is a philosophy that basically believes that a good society, works on hierarchies, right? Everyone is obedient to an emperor, and women are placed low in the hierarchy. Women are to be subservient to men, to their fathers, and their husbands. Their property of their husband. I mean, they're property of their father until they marry. Then they become their husband's property, and then later on in life, they become their son's property. So women, which is different from what the Vietnamese knew, right? Where they really valued women. It was a matriarchal society. Mothers played a really important role. Now the Chinese come and they're like, nope, where you guys have to live by Confucianism. Everybody has an order. You all are under the rule of the emperor, and women, so sad, so sad, so sad. You are at the bottom. And so they were like, well, what about our women's sexual freedom? What about women's sovereignty? And they were like, no. We're like, What about us choosing our own husbands and our own mates? They're like, no, you don't get to choose. Matter of fact, boys between age what's my computer doing? Matter of fact, boys between the age of 20 to 50 have to go out and they should marry a woman. Women between the ages, girls and women between the ages of 15 to 40, you must get married based on when the man chooses. And they're like, whoa, what is this? We really have no sovereignty anymore, right? So this was really new. The concept, it was enforced on the lax society, right? These laws were similar to the Europeans. Remember, at the same time, Caesar Augustus's laws were very similar. Remember his daughter Julia Augustus. Remember, she ran away and she was going reckless because she was like, "What are you doing? I'm not subservient. I get to choose what I want, who I have sex with." And her father was like, "Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You are property of men." So it's just Chinese culture was very similar to the European emperors at the time as well too. So the same thing was happening in China. Um, and the difference, not the difference, the similarity is that these emperors, they realized that they can, in using marriage, they can govern in a well-ordered society, right? If you push, and we're seeing that right now, pay attention to what's going on right now. It's not new. It's very similar to how these emperors ruled, right? They recognize that, oh, it's a family. If you force everybody to go into a family, the women to get married, you make the women subservient to men, you can run a well ordered society. Women aren't running out here having sex with whoever they want. They don't have bodily autonomy. Marriage, get everybody married. Marriage, marriage, marriage. And think about it. Think of married couples. No offense, no shade to married people. But like they're busy raising kids. They don't have time to be revolting. Although some you can raise a family and still do resistance and revolution, right? I see at protests, folks come with their kids to protest and stuff. And so that's not to say that every married family couple unit doesn't revolt or push back. But the chances that you had the energy to fight empire when you're raising a family is people are tired, right? Look at people. People are tired. Now you want me to go stand outside in a protest? Now you want me to write a letter? Now you want me to call my government official? I don't have time. I gotta feed these babies. And so they realized at that time that marriage was really, really, really important to ruling a state. And so they restricted women's roles. Um, Controlling marriage means you can control society, right? So think about that. Single parents, that's what this threat. Look at all of these single feminists, and you guys don't contribute. You have no stakes in the future with your cat, all these cat women, right? We're seeing it now. So it's not very different than how it was then. And so basically, people grew angry. The Vietnamese black people were like, they were getting angry. They're like, we're paying all these taxes. Or now the women don't have no rights. Like, we don't want this. Okay, it's time. So after 10 years, a new governor came in, and the new governor was called Su Ting. And so apparently Su Ting was like the worst, right? He was corrupt, even more corrupt. The taxes went up even higher. There was this complete discontent, right? So Tisak and his wife Trung Trac, they were complaining. Her husband, Trung Trac's husband, was killed because they were speaking out against the new administration. They were just like, we're not happy. The government, her husband. And so she enlisted her sister. They said, we're going to fight. We are going to fight. We know martial arts. We know all the things. We can ride the war elephants. Let's do this. We're going to take back Vietnam. And so their mom even helped. Their mom led the movements as well too. The movements was men and women. There was men and women generals, right? And so in 39 or in year 40, saying these words is wild. When you're in 2025, you're like, wow, there used to be a time when it was year 40. So either 39 or year 40, they called a battle, and they would call the battle with the drums. Drums are really important because the drums is what would call people to war. right? And the drums would later be attacked. Pay attention. In almost every society, empire comes and bans drums. They absolutely cannot stand the drum because the drum is just such resistance, right? The drum was literally what would they would use to call war. So later they would get rid of their drums and melt their irons and stuff. But and so they went to battle. They went to battle against the Chinese, and the Trunk sisters were able to take 65 cities. They were victorious, right? And Trung Trac, at that time, once they had these victories, she was chosen as a queen. Everybody voted her in. They're like, our homegirl, she needs to run us, right? So she was running things. She was a queen. In year 40, she ruled near what would be what's now Hanoi, which is a capital. And she abolished taxes. She ruled very lightly. She favored trade. She wanted to restore a lot of the native Vietnamese culture. She wanted to bring back a lot of the wealth and the trade. Guan Wudi, remember that he didn't like this. He did not like this at all. So the empire struck back, right? As the empires do. Empire struck back. And in the summer of 42, Guan Wudi appointed Ma Wan as general. And he said, Ma Wan, I need you to go to Vietnam. I need you to go to the Red Delta. I need you to go and stop these Trunk sisters. It took them a year to get there, right? It took them a year because the climate, the monsoon season, the rainforest, it was really from China all the way down to get to the Trunk sisters. It took them a year. But they made it, right? And when they were reached the Delta, a lot of Vietnamese people were killed. They surrendered. A lot of them were captured. The Trung sisters, it said that they fled. The Trung sisters fled. And it took Ma Wan a few years to kill them both. So they were on the run for a couple years before they were finally killed. There's two versions of the story. Some people say that what's his name? Ma Wan had them decapitated. So he took their heads off. He literally took their heads to bring back to China to be like, here's a proof. These girls are dead. Look at their heads. The Vietnamese have a different story. The Vietnamese say that the Trunk sisters um, drowned themselves, and so those are the two. There's two different versions of how it ends. But basically, they see themselves as Vietnamese see them as heroes, right? They sacrifice so much to fight for their liberation. Um, and even in death, they are seen as signs of rebellion, and it's their people still fought. The people still fought. So it took the Chinese a couple more years to defeat the Vietnamese, even after they took the Trunk sisters, right? So yeah, he wanted China to have the whole region. He had the bronze drums melted so they couldn't call war. And again, the taxes went back up. They raised the taxes. Old Vietnamese ways died. They introduced Confucianism again. People started to learn the Chinese way. And yeah, basically, they started going to Chinese schools. The Trunk sisters became a symbol of freedom. The Lac people, they built a temple. They built a temple to them, and they have the sanctuary that has their statues. And the Chinese rule would end in year 939. So from 39 to 939, that's like what, 900 more years? Damn. So the Chinese would rule for, um, yeah, and then before the Vietnamese would take it back. But again, that's not the end of the struggle for the Vietnamese people, right? Because we know that then they had to deal with the French and then the Americans. But through all of those different eras, they turned to the Trac sisters, um, the Trunk sisters, sorry, as a sign of hope, right? As a sign of hope. So those are the Trunk sisters. I wanted to come through them again. I'm going to do one more. We're going to go to China now and talk about Wu Zetian. So until next time, I'll be right back in solidarity.